More questions about Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. I'm Mike Thompson. The ties between Ohio billionaire Les Wexner and sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein are well known. They were friends. Epstein controlled Wexner's money. Epstein lived for a time near Wexner in New Albany. Wexner has maintained he did not know of Epstein's sex trafficking and accused Epstein of stealing from him. But with each new release of Epstein files, questions grow about Wexner's role in Epstein's activities. This week, redacted investigative documents label Wexner as a co-conspirator. This has only increased calls for Central Ohio institutions to cut ties with perhaps their largest benefactor. First on the list is Ohio State University, home of the Wexner Arts Center, the Wexner Football Complex, and the Wexner Medical Center. OSU President Ted Carter told WOSU's All Sides with Amy Juravich this week, the university has received more than 24 requests to remove Wexner's name from university assets.
The co-conspirator word is alleged co-conspirator. We have to remember that. He's never been indicted. He hasn't been arrested. So we take all this very seriously. And when it comes to the naming, we're going to go through a process with that. That's what we have built. There is a process, and we'll follow that. And I don't want to speculate on what may or may not happen with that.
So if he is, it goes from alleged to being truly considered a co-conspirator with Epstein, would you consider removing his name from buildings?
Again, we'll go through the process. It's very defined. It involves the board, and we just follow that process. So we'll follow that. We've got to let the Department of Justice and House do their work, and we'll be paying close attention.
Ted Carter, very cautious in his response there. But the fact that there's even the possibility of Ohio State University removing Les Wexner's name from its buildings is extraordinary.
It is, although I really respect the way President Carter said that there has to be a process. It can't be how many emails or tweets have we gotten about this. There needs to be a process because it's easy to make an allegation. I mean, as a part-time prosecutor, I live in a world of proof. I have to prove things. So it's easy for people to send an email saying, I don't like this, you should take his name down. So let's remain calm, do a process, and I frankly was impressed with how calm and thoughtful President Carter was in that clip there.
Brian, but other organizations have not been, they've been more quick to disassociate employees who are tied to Epstein.
Well, I think first of all, given what's going on nationally, it's become a big issue to do that. But Ohio State also has kind of a tragic history when it comes to this. I mean, the Blackwell Business School is named after someone that went to prison, and they never removed the name there. There are other people that have donated things that have had major lawsuits against them that went against them. So it's interesting that he did say that there will be a process, because there hasn't been a fair process and an even process. I would also say that he is alleged, until we know for sure. There could be some legal issues that they have to deal with as well, as you know. As
not even legal allegations right now, it's social media buzz.
Right. So I think there has to be a process for President Carter. I thought what was really interesting about his comments, which maybe we'll get into in a bit, is he kind of threw Gordon Gee under the bus.
Yeah, Jake, Gordon Gee, a couple of weeks ago on the same show, All Sides show, said that Les Wexner was a victim of cancel culture, and he stood by him. He had actually talked to him that morning from Florida, and he just thinks this is really much ado about nothing, and they should move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's interesting. He said a process, but I'm not sure what process he's referring to. I mean, so much of the Jeffrey Epstein case is really about that process failing. There was evidence that Jeffrey Epstein committed more crimes than he was charged with, and Alex Acosta, as a young prosecutor, did not pursue that line of evidence. The government seemed to, at some point, consider Les Wexner a co-conspirator. Did they rule that out, and hence he wasn't charged, or did the case just not advance? So I guess I'm curious what that, I mean, it's true, he is innocent until he's proven guilty, but does OSU plan to hire a law firm, perhaps, to investigate and get to the bottom for itself of, is this person a guilty person? Or is it just, if he gets indicted, then we will remove his buildings, and if, I don't know, say a statute of limitations is passed, then we keep it up?
Yeah, I think this process he talks about was launched in 2021, 22, when after the George Floyd murder, a lot of names who were associated with racial past or racist past were considered to be removed from buildings. I think the Thompson Library was the first thing that they've looked at over the past few years.
The other thing interesting about the co-conspirator term, when they start throwing that out, even in an alleged fashion, is that it's most often used in the case of a RICO case.
It's a legal term. When you bring an indictment for somebody who's committed a crime, you can say that somebody conspired with them to commit a crime. It's a pretty low bar to bring an indictment. It's probable cause. Even harder to convict them. You know what? Here's the new rule. This is Mark's new rule. Let's not name things after people until they're dead.
That would be the easiest way to do it.
In my hometown of Philadelphia, half of Temple was named after Bill Cosby, and then that had to be taken down.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that Les Wexner and Bill Cosby have anything in common other than they're both alive. So allow people to die before we put their names on things and give a little reflection about whether they should have things.
I like that. We can take the president's name off of. The president's name can come off the Kennedy Center now.
Well, it would make but the bottom line is he gave a lot of money. He was. I mean,
well, that's why this happens. I get it. No, I know why it happens.
And I mean, he was. His business career. He went from a small shop in the Upper Arlington to this retail empire. His business story is incredible. He's been a generous person.
I have no quarrel with that. I'm
and
just saying,
I wouldn't either.
But you can see why his name is on the building.
I actually think he's been one of the most maleficent benefactors of many wealthy people across the country, and you can't take that away from him. This is just a huge stain on everything he's ever done.
What do politicians do? They're already making some noise. The politicians who have accepted campaign donations from Les Wexner. John Husted has. Joyce Beatty also has gotten a lot of campaign donations from Les Wexner. This is going to become an issue in the campaign.
You can't give it back, so you have to donate it to somebody else. Yeah.
Well, I've advised a lot of politicians in that exact situation. My view is, did the money come because that person believes in what the politician did, or is the politician doing something because of the money? The latter is improper and something should be done about it. The former is typical. Anybody who wants to donate for Member of Congress Smith because that person believes in a stronger military, those donations are fine, no matter who they come from.
And Wexner traditionally has given money to mainly more Republicans than Democrats, but he's given money to Democrats.
And his wife also gives more money to Democrats.
Well, and back in the day, Celeste. But look here, as this goes through, it is taking down royal families. It is affecting the White House and the Prime Minister of Britain. That's part of the reason that, if you're a politician, you're going to give this money away. It's just not worth going through the heartache of what this is about.
So some politicians view it as a distraction or a problem, and they would sooner donate it. But
when you think about it, the Prime Minister of Great Britain could be ousted because of a third degree of separation.
It is. That's exactly right. It was
we
his
know-
chief of staff who was somehow connected to the former Prince Andrew, who was somehow connected to Epstein.
But we know Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein were friends for a couple of decades.
Yes.
But yet, we're still being very cautious in this
Well,
process.
there's no denying that it was really dumb to hang out with Jeffrey Epstein. There's just no good common sense reason to do it. The question is, was a law broken, and where's the evidence that the law was broken? And to date, I've seen nothing.
The cloud over the university. We saw it this week with the confrontation between a camera person and a assistant professor, basically asking questions about this. Jake, do you think the university would want the cloud removed and move on from this?
No, I don't think anyone wants to be under the cloud of Les Wexner. And I would slightly disagree with Mark. There is a question of has a law been broken, but there is another question of whether or not a law has been broken. What is a person with good judgment and good morals doing around Les Wexner? I mean, just
about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, I'm sorry, around Jeffrey Epstein or around Les Wexner, around anyone who has been in this person's orbit, who has been repeatedly accused of enabling his behavior, who managed his money. The New York Times put out a very comprehensive report 6 weeks ago that traced a lot of how Jeffrey Epstein climbed through the ranks back to Les Wexner. I think a reasonable person can take a look at the facts and say whether or not, we have very high standards of evidence in this country to put people away and lock them up for life. That's a good thing, but you don't need to follow the laws of evidence to make a good moral judgment.
And tagging on to that, we have a president of the United States who is very close to the same man.
But enough about Bill Clinton. Remember, the recent Epstein files have showed that Trump spoke to the FBI 20 years ago and said, there's something wrong with this guy. You should look at him. We've got no such report to the FBI from Bill Clinton. Having said that, his orbit is big and it includes Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah. We shall see where this all ends. Haitian immigrants in Ohio remain in a state of limbo. A judge has extended their legal status while a court case continues. Immigration officials told the court they did plan enforcement actions had that temporary protected status expired earlier this month. Governor DeWine says he has gotten assurances that federal authorities will give him 24 hours notice of any increased enforcement activity. Meanwhile, at the State House, there are proposals to require local agencies cooperate with immigration agents, and activists urged local judges to ban ICE arrests inside Franklin County Municipal Courthouse rooms and hallways. Brian Rutherford, how much should local agencies be cooperating with immigration officials right now?
If there were a crime and they are required to, they should. But I think in this instance, there's so many other factors that go into this, and it is not the same as some of the other types of immigration issues that have happened. You're sending people back into harm's way into a country that quite frankly, Governor DeWine's an expert on and knows how dangerous it is. You have children that are actually American citizens, and they're parents of these children. You have driver's licenses being, canceled out so that people can be just stopped in their car and taken when this happens. There is a better way to do this. And, I think if you look at most Americans, it's the way in which we do it and whether you're actually going after the criminal element first. And that's what's been lost.
Let's go back to the question you asked, which is whether or not locals should cooperate with federals. Let me give you a different example. The Internet Crimes Against Children is an FBI unit that goes after people who have child porn. It's federal law enforcement, just like ICE is. Now imagine a local courthouse knows that there is someone in that courthouse who has a computer holding on to child porn. And here comes the FBI to go arrest that person. Under this theory of we're not going to cooperate because we're a sanctuary against people who have child sex abuse materials or child porn on their computer. Federal law enforcement gets to enforce federal law.
Wouldn't those folks have to have a warrant, though? Well,
it depends on where you're going. If it's an arrest warrant or a search warrant, those are two different things. But certainly if the people running the courthouse know that, yes, that person works here and that computer needs to be looked at, whether it's a warrant or not, we should be cooperating. People who have a different view on the policy, and I hear you on the policy, you go to Congress to change policy. You don't ask frontline law enforcement officers to change
So here's
policy.
the other perspective from a judge. A judge will tell you, I have a client who is waiting to go to trial against somebody that committed a crime against me.
A judge?
A judge. I have a judge or I have a client, whatever it is, if you're a prosecutor. And then ICE comes in and arrests that person and they never get their chance in court. And that has happened.
But they're supposed to be in another country. The advantage to having people be arrested in the courthouse is we don't have danger in the courthouse because everyone is screened before you come in for guns and for weapons. And so by saying we're not going to allow these apprehensions to happen in a safe place, that forces federal law enforcement to do it in places where there are people who do have guns and rocks and knives.
Lawmakers are trying to require local agencies to cooperate. They're trying to require hospitals to cooperate with ICE and immigration officials. Doesn't that violate the home rule? How do they get around that, the home rule provision in the Constitution?
I think you would actually need a lawyer to unspool. I mean, you have federal law enforcement agencies. You have cities trying to pull one way. You have a state house trying to pull another way. I could not possibly even begin to unspool that. But I think that's almost telling in just how chaotic this has all been. You have three parties pulling in different directions. I should wear masks. I should not wear masks. You have people who, whether we like the policy or not, have been granted TPS, have been given some degree of legal certainty to be in this country. You get signals that this policy is going to end. You have a federal law enforcement agency that's saying we might come in, we might not come in. You have litigation on this being ping-ponged around between different levels. Nobody knows anything of what's going to happen, and people are living in fear. I mean,
Mark, you're close to police agencies. You work with the FOP. Well, how do local police officers, sheriffs, deputies, how do they feel about this? Do they want to get involved in this?
I talk to them every day, and they are appalled that there's not cooperation, that their political leaders at the city level typically are telling them not to back up the federal law enforcement. The worst video, was among the worst, was the ICE agent who had been beaten with rocks by a crowd who's on his cell phone calling 911 in Minneapolis saying, where's the local police? Anybody who's been beaten by a crowd with rocks should be able to call 911 and get back up. And cops are frankly offended that they shouldn't be able to go back up anybody, much less a fellow law enforcement officer.
Except for somebody who's being tackled by ICE. Apparently they can't call 911.
Sure they can. But
No,
first
they
of all,
don't
if they're
respond.
being
They
apprehended
don't
by
respond.
apprehending somebody who's violated the law is what law enforcement officers do every day. A domestic abuser who's running away from the scene, here's what the cops do. They tackle him, they put him into custody, and we sort this out in court. And that's where things should be
But
sorted out.
I will say, in the case of the judges, in fairness to them, they're trying to run a courtroom. They're trying to give people that have had crimes committed against them their day in court, and somebody comes in and takes
Not
them
in the
to court.
courtroom. None of this is happening in the courtroom.
But
it's
they
the
never get
hallways
to
of the courthouse.
Yeah, and they never get to the court.
That's because they're
or
not
the trial.
entitled to be in this country.
But they were entitled and were here and committed a crime. So why can't the justice system work first?
Because there's two laws at risk. One is the law they're in court about, and the law that they're supposed to be in another country.
So I
The
don't
federal
get my-
government,
so I
per
don't
our
get-
Congress, Democrats and Republicans said, if you come here illegally, it's a crime, and you can be either prosecuted or deported.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying you should have your day in court if a crime's been committed
All right,
against
we'll
you.
get to the next topic. Governor DeWine this week predicted Ohio's sales taxes would have to rise from 6% all the way up to 20% if voters were to get rid of property taxes. He said Ohio would also have to have one of the highest income tax rates in the country. Still, supporters of a proposed amendment to abolish Ohio's property taxes remain undeterred. They continue to collect signatures to get the question on November's ballot. They have to collect more than 400,000 valid voter signatures by July 1st. As for how many they have collected so far, a leader of the group refused to say.
I'm pretty confident. I mean, here's the thing. If we don't make our mark by July 1st, we get to keep collecting. Those signatures are good indefinitely unless you die or move. So, we're not going to stop. I mean, just because we don't get it by July 1st, if we don't, which I think we will, I mean, based on what we're doing this month, holy mackerel, I think we will. But if we don't, then we keep collecting.
Jack Zuckerman, it seems like this group it's a grassroots group, and they're relying on people to find them to sign the petitions as much as they're going out and finding people to sign them. Will that work?
Probably not, if that's really the whole strategy. You need not just the number, you need the 400,000 signatures you mentioned. You need that number X too, because many aren't going to count. You need them from 44 counties. The magnet strategy, which is now my term, trademark reserved, is I don't see how you can possibly get to the right numbers with a figure like that.
Yeah, she was pointing out that this is revaluation time, property tax time, and people getting their bills and getting mad. And they have a website where they have every county. You can click on where to find a signature, a petition, signature gatherer. But Mark, we do have the primary election coming up in May, which is...
Well, that's the best place to get them. So first of all, I've advised 13 statewide ballot questions over the years. They're very hard to get on the ballot. But the best place to get signatures is people coming out of a polling place, because we're pretty sure they're registered to vote exactly where they are. Yeah. And so the problem is not the energy for property tax reform. That's palpable. There's some energy behind that. The problem is getting the right person to sign the right petition in the right way so that signature can count. And so it's very hard to do.
They're not using signature gatherers, the paid firms, Brian, to collect these signatures, because they say they don't want to, when they do that, when they affiliate with another group, then they get to call some of the shots, and they don't want that.
Well, I mean, history would say it's very unlikely that they'll get there. However, just the fact that they're gathering signatures can have an impact. As a newly elected official here, I can tell you that people don't even think about the long-term effects of what this will be almost immediately. Should it be filed in July? And I've talked to some of the people that give credit for paying for fire trucks, paying for police cars, those type of things. Your credit will dry up in a municipality because it's based on that future income that you're going to get. Should it now it will go back up if it fails. You'll still have your credit. If it doesn't go back up, you have none. But then when bond collections come in, your bondholders have a responsibility to collect that money.
Brian, Norwich Township trustee, newly elected.
Wow, you became one of them.
I did. I
mean a politician. I don't mean Norwich Township. You became a politician.
But I will tell you, I was up in Detroit when they went bankrupt, and bondholders they have to go after the money. They were going after art in the art museum. They were going after public infrastructure and bridges. This will bankrupt people. It will be surprising how many things that we as the public own that won't be owned anymore.
But it's not going to happen, Jake, because Governor DeWine's going to increase, he won't be governor probably, but he's going to increase sales tax to 20%. Does he have the votes in the legislature to do that?
I don't know, but if what he's like, if this really passes, you are talking about fiscal crisis. So I wouldn't write off the possibility of some kind of shock reaction like that. On the bond issue, I'd point out a few years back, some lawmakers had an idea of, let's make it harder to raise taxes. Let's say you need a supermajority in the legislature to raise taxes. Some of the credit agencies came in and said, I don't think they were hard and fast, but we would consider decreasing the state of Ohio's credit rating, because if you guys really needed revenue, it would be much harder to get it. That was talking about getting 60 lawmakers to vote for something instead of 50. What's going to happen when you just knock out one leg of a three-legged stool?
But it shows that the governor is nervous about this by coming out with these dire predictions.
Governor DeWine has been a good manager of government in large measure, and he's been around government a long time. He knows how things work. And so there's an old saying, you don't never ignore an old barking dog. My old friend Mike DeWine hopefully won't be too mad at that comparison, but someone who's been around a long time sounding an alarm should at least be listened to.
All right. Ohio's relationship with legal marijuana is about a year and a half old, and it is complicated. For lawmakers, the relationship was forced upon them when voters legalized recreational marijuana. After more than a year of debate, they recently changed that law, tightening restrictions and banning banning Ohioans from seeing other people to get high by banning intoxicating hemp and THC drinks. Hemp producers and sellers are trying to repeal that law, but the marijuana industry is campaigning against the repeal. Nationally, some big supporters of legalization may be having second thoughts. The New York Times, for example, this week urged tighter restrictions in an editorial titled, "It is time for America to admit it has a marijuana problem." Mark Weaver, the campaign to legalize marijuana was called Treat It Like Alcohol. Alcohol has its share of problems, of course. We all know them. Should it be any surprise that if we're going to treat marijuana like alcohol, that marijuana is going to have problems?
A lot of problems, and in some cases worse than alcohol. Certainly what it does to the brain, we now have evidence. And those people who smoked pot 40 years ago will say it was no big deal. The THC of today is, by some tapes, 100-fold more powerful. And the notion of going to big cities and smelling marijuana, the smell of failure, everywhere you go. When I was in New York City last year, my wife and I stepped out of the train station and immediately you smell marijuana. Nobody wants that in Ohio. The law that's in place now that should stay in place would require people, if they want to smoke pot, to smoke it in their private home. But what a shock that the New York Times has admitted that they were way too out there suggesting pay no attention to marijuana. It's harmless.
Is this any different, Brian, than sports betting? People say, well, it's just going to break it above board. And the same people who are betting sort of with their bookie are just going to bet online. But no, it exploded. And marijuana use has really increased a lot.
Both of them have societal issues, and we're in this era where people have decided it, and it's going to grow, and we're going to have to sort of constrain it or get our hands on it. I've said before, and I think President Trump actually finally changed the schedule of it, because one of the problems in the marijuana industry actually is cash-only business, which causes other kinds of graft and corruption that can happen. So we'll see what happens with that. But you're also getting into the era of big marijuana against hemp sales, and so you're sort of dealing with those little brush fires.
The state has received $180 million in marijuana sales and excise taxes, Jake, since it was made legal. That's a lot of money. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's a lot of money still.
It is a lot of money, and there's kind of a freedom issue underpinning all of it. Should an adult have the right to, destroy their lungs, smell like failure, whatever you want to call it, bet on sports? We've let it. I think the interesting thing the New York Times was getting into in that editorial was that maybe we need to look at some of the corporate behavior here, some of the marketing, some of the potency of these products, and to my knowledge, that's not being addressed in any of these in Senate Bill 56 really at all. And moreover, that's not really the focus. The Attorney General Dave Yost just filed an interesting price-fixing lawsuit against, I believe, 9 marijuana companies. That's the most aggressive action I've seen on the corporate side. But I'm just curious, the bulk of Senate Bill 56 on marijuana is things like keeping it stored in your trunk and not bringing it in from Michigan, which is actually a move that protects the industry more than anything.
All right, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. Mark Weaver, up first.
There was a thought-provoking editorial in the Dispatch, an op-ed from a local resident and Columbus school graduate, Phil Darrow, who suggested that the Columbus City schools have gotten so big and are starting to have so many problems that maybe it's time to break it into 4 or 5 smaller districts. It's a smart read. I recommend people take a look at that. Something has to be done.
Brian.
Legislature's about to tackle with some of these big energy-sucking
Data centers?
Data centers, thank you. They're talking about restoring the actual property tax on it. It's a real problem because if you don't have anything coming out of that revenue-wise, you still have to provide services for it.
Right. Jake.
I wanted to give a rest in peace to Steve Steinglass, as a man who lived and breathed the Ohio Constitution. He wrote a book on the Ohio Constitution. He spent the bulk of his 80s defending what he saw as a political attack on the Ohio Constitution. And he was always very, very charitable with both his time and actually sending chapters of his book to reporters who are not lawyers. So rest in peace, Mr. Steinglass.
The snow is melting. It is. It's going to melt even more next week. But I want to give a thank you to the metro parks and cities like Dublin who plow their bike trails and walking trails. They do a wonderful job, better sometimes than the city does on their streets, oftentimes. So for us runners, dog walkers, bikers, we do appreciate all the work you do to keep those paths clear and keep us safe. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the discussion online. A new place to share comments is our new WOSU News YouTube page. There you can watch every episode and complain about us. Go to YouTube, search WOSU News and click subscribe. You can watch us on demand also on the PBS app and our website, WOSU.org. For our crew and panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.